I wasn't thinking about her. That's the part I need you to understand before anything else. I had spent 11 years not thinking about her. 11 years of building a careful, deliberate, perfectly reasonable life. And I was very good at it. I was so good at not thinking about Clara that I had almost convinced myself there was nothing to think about. And then I walked into the wrong waiting room. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that doesn't announce itself as the day your life changes, because if it did, you'd stay in bed. I'd been at work since 7 in the morning. I had a container of leftover pasta in my bag that I hadn't eaten, and my left knee had been doing this weird clicking thing that my friend Jess had been nagging me about for 3 weeks. Just go get it looked at, Millie. It takes 40 minutes. So I went. Urgent care on Maple Street. Simple. Except the Maple Street location was closed for a pipe burst, and the receptionist on the phone very cheerfully redirected me to the ER at St. Catherine's Medical Center, 14 blocks north. I sat in that waiting room for an hour and 20 minutes. I scrolled through my phone. I watched a woman knit what appeared to be a very ambitious scarf. I filled out the intake form. Knee pain, 6 weeks, no trauma, no swelling, no fever. When they finally called my name and a nurse walked me back to a curtained bay, I was thinking about nothing except whether I could bill this to my FSA. And then the curtain opened, and I stopped breathing. Not dramatically. Not in a way that anyone would have noticed. I just stopped. For about 3 seconds, long enough for my brain to process what my eyes were seeing, long enough for something to crack open in my chest that I hadn't even known was sealed shut. She was taller than I remembered. Her hair was shorter. She was wearing green scrubs and a stethoscope, and a very focused expression that shifted, the second she looked up from the chart, into something I couldn't immediately read. "Millie," she said. Not a question. Just my name, said in a voice I had spent 11 years carefully, deliberately, successfully not thinking about. Clara Reyes. My high school. I don't even know what to call her. My high school something. The girl who sat 3 rows ahead of me in AP English. The girl whose handwriting I used to watch when she passed notes she never passed to me. The girl I had filed, very neatly, into a folder in the back of my mind labeled things that don't matter anymore. She was looking at me like the folder had just opened on its own. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that I didn't hate it. I should explain who Clara was to me, or who I told myself she was. We went to Westview High together in Cincinnati, Ohio, class of 2011. We were not friends. We were not enemies. We were 2 people who existed in adjacent orbits without ever quite colliding, close enough to know each other's names, far enough that I could pretend I didn't notice when she walked into a room. Except I always noticed when she walked into a room. Clara Reyes was the kind of person who made noticing her feel like a reflex. She was confident without being loud about it. She argued with teachers, not to be difficult, but because she actually cared about whether things were true. She wore her hair in this long, dark braid that she'd flip over one shoulder when she was thinking, and she had a laugh that was slightly too loud for the library, which was somehow exactly right everywhere else. We were in AP English together junior and senior year. We were in the same chemistry class for 1 semester. We sat at opposite ends of the lunch table that belonged to no particular group. The misfit table, some people called it. Though I always thought that was too dramatic a name for a collection of perfectly functional individuals who just didn't fit neatly into any other category. Clara sat at that table and talked to everyone. I sat at that table and talked to very few people, and I told myself that was a choice I was making. I was not, I told myself, one of those people who developed feelings for their female classmates. That was not something that happened to me. I was Millie Hartwell, organized, practical, future dental hygienist, person who had her life sorted out before most people had even started. I did not have unexplained feelings about the girl in 3rd row of English class. What I had was an appreciation for interesting people. Clara was interesting. That was all. I noticed the way she talked with her hands when she was excited about something, fingers spreading wide like she was trying to hold the idea in the air. I noticed that she always had a book in her bag that wasn't assigned reading. I noticed that she never walked into a room halfway. She was either fully present or somewhere else entirely, and when she turned that full presence in your direction, it felt like standing in the sun after a long winter. But that was just observation. I observed things. That was a personality trait. Senior year, there was one afternoon in April. We'd both stayed late after school. Her for some kind of student council thing, me for the library, which closed at 6. I was walking to the bus stop, and she fell into step beside me, and we talked for 4 blocks about nothing in particular. A book we'd both read. Something stupid a teacher had said that week. The way Cincinnati in spring always smelled like rain even when it wasn't raining. She had this habit of looking at you directly when you said something. Not in an aggressive way, but like what you were saying mattered enough to deserve her full attention. Nobody had ever made me feel like that. Like my words were worth following. We got to the bus stop and she said, "You're actually really easy to talk to, Millie. I don't know why we never did this before." I said something. I don't remember what. Something adequate and forgettable. And then her bus came, and she got on it, and I stood there on the corner for a moment longer than necessary, and I told myself it didn't mean anything. I graduated 2 months later. I moved to Columbus for school. I built my organized, practical, forward-moving life. I put Clara Reyes in the folder and closed it. I was very good at closing things. She sat down on the rolling stool across from me, and she looked at the chart, and she said, "Knee pain. Okay, how long has this been going on?" Professional. Calm. Like she treated old classmates she hadn't spoken to in 11 years every single Tuesday. Maybe she did. She was an ER doctor. She probably saw all kinds of things. 6 weeks, I said. Give or take. Any specific incident? Did you fall, twist it, anything like that? No, it just started clicking. She nodded. She asked me to describe the click. She asked me to bend and straighten my leg. She asked me follow-up questions in a voice that was the same voice I remembered. That same quality of being completely present. Except now it was wrapped in a clinical frame that made it almost manageable. Almost. "I don't think it's anything serious," she said finally. "Probably patellofemoral syndrome. I'm going to order an X-ray to rule out anything structural, and I'll give you a referral for PT. In the meantime, ice it when it bothers you. Maybe cut back on stairs." A small pause. "Though knowing you live somewhere with 4 flights of stairs and an unreliable elevator." I blinked. She caught herself. A tiny shift in her expression. Not embarrassment, exactly. Something more careful than that. "Sorry, I don't actually know that. I live on the 3rd floor," I said. "Elevator works fine." She smiled. And that was the first moment I understood that I was in trouble. Because it wasn't a polite smile. It wasn't a professional smile. It was a Clara smile. The one that was slightly crooked on the left side. The one that had no performance in it at all. The one that meant she found something genuinely funny rather than just socially appropriate. I had not thought about that smile in 11 years. I was thinking about it now. We went through the rest of the appointment in a kind of careful equilibrium. She was professional. I was cooperative. We were 2 adults in a medical setting, behaving appropriately. When the X-ray came back clean, she gave me the PT referral and a sheet of exercises, and she paused at the curtain before leaving and said, "It's good to see you, Millie, really." "You too," I said. I meant it in the normal way people mean things. That's what I told myself on the bus home. I meant it in the way you mean it when you run into someone from high school, and it's a pleasant surprise, and then you go home and don't think about it again. I thought about it for 4 days straight. Not obsessively, not in a dramatic way, Just, her name kept surfacing, the way she'd said my name. Millie, like it was familiar, like it was comfortable in her mouth. The slight angle of her head when she was listening to my answers. The fact that she remembered somehow that I was the kind of person who might live somewhere with a lot of stairs. That specific detail, that specific observation about me from 11 years ago. She had kept something too. That's what I kept coming back to. She had put something about me in a folder of her own. I told Jess about the appointment. Jess, who I had known since college, who was my best friend and my most reliable source of reality checks and excellent takeout recommendations. I told her I'd gone to the ER for my knee, and it turned out my high school acquaintance was the doctor. Acquaintance? Jess said. Yes, just a regular acquaintance. Why are you saying it like that? No reason, Jess said, in the tone of someone with many reasons. I dropped it. I went to my PT appointment. I did my knee exercises every morning like a responsible adult. I did not Google Clara Reyes. I thought about Googling Clara Reyes and then very deliberately did not, which I counted as a win. It was fine. Everything was fine. Except the following Thursday, I was on my lunch break at work, eating a sandwich at my desk, and I had this thought, completely unprompted out of nowhere, about the way she'd tilted her chart slightly to show me the X-ray results. The way she'd pointed to the image and explained what we were looking at, like she genuinely wanted me to understand rather than just to receive information, like the understanding was the point. I sat there with half a sandwich in my hand, thinking about nothing except that. And then I realized I'd been sitting there for 4 minutes. I put down the sandwich. I opened a new patient file. I said to myself, this is nothing. People from your past reappear sometimes. It's not significant. It's just your brain processing a surprise. My brain did not appear to receive this message. 2 weeks after the ER visit, I was returning my library books, the good library on 5th Street, the one with the big windows on the 2nd floor. And I ran into her again. She was standing in front of the paperback fiction section with a book in her hand, wearing jeans and a dark green jacket, reading the back cover with the same expression she used to have in English class when something caught her. That look of concentration that was just slightly different from her regular face. More focused, more interior. She looked up. Our eyes met across 12 feet of library floor. Neither of us said anything for a moment. And then I felt it. This small, embarrassing warmth that started somewhere in my chest and moved upward. And I understood, with a clarity I really didn't want, that my brain had not been processing a surprise. It had been looking for a way to explain something it already knew. "Do you live near here?" she asked. Quiet voice. Library appropriate. 4 blocks east, I said. You? About half a mile north. I moved here 2 years ago. She held up the book slightly. I'm off today. I've been in here for 40 minutes already. I've been in here for longer on worse days, I said. She smiled. That smile again. I filed a formal complaint against it, internally. We ended up at the table by the big windows. I don't know how it happened exactly. We were standing in adjacent aisles, and then we were at the table, and then we were talking. Not about high school, about the books we'd each been reading lately, about the neighborhood, about how she'd moved from Pittsburgh after her residency and found that Cincinnati had changed more than she expected, and yet had not changed at all in the ways that mattered. What ways are those? I asked. She thought about it. The way it smells in spring, she said. Still smells like rain even when it isn't raining. I went very still. She didn't notice or pretended not to. She kept talking. Something about a coffee shop on 5th that she'd discovered. Something about a case that had been hard last week. Something about a book she'd read in 3 days because she couldn't put it down. She talked the way I remembered, fully present, hands moving, like the conversation was worth her complete attention. and I sat there and listened, and I was smiling at things she said, and I was contributing, and we were having a perfectly normal conversation between two adults who had happened to go to the same high school and happened to live in the same neighborhood and happened to run into each other twice in 2 weeks. Normal. Except that I noticed, at some point, that an hour had passed, and then another 30 minutes, and neither of us had moved to leave, and the library was starting to fill up with the after-school crowd, and she finally looked at her watch and said, "I have to get groceries before dinner or I'll eat cereal again." "I did that twice this week," I said. "We're both doing great," she said. She stood up, and then she paused, and she looked at me with this expression I couldn't fully read, something between decision and question, and she said, "Can I give you my number, in case you ever want to continue the conversation?" I said yes. Of course I said yes. On the walk home, I told myself, this is just two people who used to know each other becoming friendly. This is normal adult socialization. This is what emotionally healthy people do. They run into someone from their past and they don't make it weird, and they exchange contact information and they text occasionally, and it's fine. I got home and I sat on my couch and I stared at her name in my phone for longer than I should have. Jess texted me that night. "How's the knee?" "Fine," I wrote back. I ran into Clara again. 3 dots appeared. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. "Who's Clara?" she wrote. "You know who Clara is," I wrote back. "The ER doctor from high school who you called an acquaintance?" "Yes." "How did you run into her again?" "Library. Millie. What?" "Nothing." "How was the library?" I put my phone down. The thing was, and this is the part I kept circling without landing, the thing was that I recognized what I was feeling. I recognized it the way you recognize a song you haven't heard in 20 years, imprecisely, with a sensation of something older than language. A warmth that had no good explanation, a wanting to know more. A slight rearrangement of the day into before the thing and after the thing, where the thing was whatever had just happened. I recognized it because I had felt it before. Once. Years ago. 3 rows ahead in AP English. And I had put it in a folder and closed the folder and rebuilt my life on top of it, and the folder had held for 11 years. And now the folder was open, and Clara Reyes was in my phone contacts, and I was sitting on my couch at 9:30 on a Thursday, feeling like the floor had shifted 2 inches to the left. I was not the person this happened to. That was the thing. I was Millie Hartwell. I was organized and measured, and I had a plan. My life fit together in a way that made sense. I knew who I was. I had always known who I was. Except that when I thought about the afternoon in April senior year, 4 blocks to the bus stop, which I had not thought about in 11 years, what I felt was not nostalgia. What I felt was something that had never finished. We texted. Carefully at first. Occasional messages. A book recommendation from her. A question from me about a neighborhood restaurant. Gradually. Less carefully. More frequently. Conversations that started in the afternoon and ran into late evening without my noticing the time go. She was funny in a way I'd forgotten. Dry, observant. Slightly ruthless about the things that deserved it. She told stories about the ER that were somehow both horrifying and hysterical. She asked questions that required actual thought to answer, not just the surface-level responses most people were satisfied with. She remembered things I mentioned in passing and brought them back later. She'd said once, in a message, "You mentioned the bookshop on Colton Street. Did you end up going back?" I had mentioned it once, 1 week before, in a sentence that was not the point of the message. She'd kept it. I kept everything she said, too. I just hadn't admitted that to myself yet. She invited me to coffee one Saturday in November. Real coffee, a place she'd been wanting to try. I said yes, obviously. I picked out 3 different things to wear before settling on the first thing I'd originally picked. I was not a person who did that. I didn't have complicated feelings about choosing an outfit. I did that morning. The coffee shop was good. The coffee was excellent. She was across a small wooden table from me in the morning light, and she had a habit of curling both hands around her mug, and she was talking about something she'd read, and I was listening and responding and being a normal, functional person. And at some point she paused mid-sentence and looked at me and she said, "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said. "Did you know? In high school. Did you know what you felt?" The mug in my hands suddenly required a great deal of attention. "I don't know what you mean," I said. She looked at me steadily, not unkindly. "I think you do." I said nothing for a moment. The coffee shop made soft sounds around us. Someone's child was asking for more hot chocolate at the counter. It was all very normal and regular, and I was sitting there with my heart doing something complicated that I had no good words for. "I think," I said finally, "that I was very good at not knowing things." She nodded slowly. "Me too," she said. Something shifted in the air between us. I could feel it, not dramatically, not like a thunderclap, more like a pressure equalizing. Like two things that had been slightly misaligned clicking into place without force. I looked down at my coffee. She said quietly, "I used to watch you in English class." I looked up. "The way you used to annotate your books," she said. "I'd see the margins on your pages when you were in front of me. So much ink. You took everything seriously. I like that about you." She paused. "I thought about you a lot after graduation. I thought about that walk to the bus stop." The child at the counter was delighted with the hot chocolate now. Completely delighted. "I thought about that too," I said. It came out quietly. Barely. But it came out. She looked at me, and she did not look away. And I did not look away. And between us there was this thing, this enormous, inconvenient, unmistakable thing that I had been refusing to name for weeks now, maybe for 11 years. And sitting in that coffee shop in November, I felt the full weight of it for the first time. Not with relief. Not yet. With something closer to panic. Because the thing I had figured out finally, sitting in this coffee shop with my coffee going cold, the thing I had run from for years and years and years, was not just that Clara Reyes was the most interesting person I'd ever known. It was not just that I looked forward to her texts more than I looked forward to most things in my week. It was not just that she made me feel somehow more like myself than I usually managed on my own. It was that I recognized something in her. Something I had always recognized and always refused to name. She was the version of myself I had been most afraid to meet. The one who said the true thing out loud. The one who looked directly at what was hard and didn't glance away. The one who had annotated her own life in ink so thick you could feel it from 3 rows back. I had spent 11 years becoming someone careful, someone who kept things in folders. And Clara Reyes kept walking back out of the folder, standing in the light, looking at me with that steady, crooked left side smile, like she'd always known the folder was a temporary measure. I said I had to get going. I had something in the afternoon. I invented something. She said, "Okay." She said it without pressure, without hurt, without anything that would have been fair to respond to. Just, okay. I walked home. The sky was the gray blue of November, and my knee wasn't clicking anymore, and I went up my 3 flights of stairs and I sat on my couch and I thought, I am in so much trouble. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, you already know exactly what Millie is feeling right now. That specific kind of terrified. The kind where the thing you've been avoiding finally has a shape. Hit the like button if this is getting to you. It really helps me keep bringing stories like this one to you. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and hit the bell. You don't want to miss how this ends. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever recognized yourself in someone else and felt scared before you felt anything good? Like the mirror showed you something you weren't ready to see? Type it for me. I read every single one. And tell me where you're watching from. I'll heart every city. Now. Back to Millie. I pulled back. I'm not proud of it. I'm telling you because it's true. I pulled back, and I did it in the cowardly way, the way that's designed to be invisible. I didn't say I needed space. I didn't explain. I just slowed down, responded to her texts more briefly, suggested I was busy when she mentioned getting coffee again. Kept the conversation surface level, the way you keep a door open just enough that no one can accuse you of slamming it. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She didn't say anything for 2 weeks. She kept the text light, followed my lead, didn't push. And that was somehow worse than if she'd pushed. The patience of it, the respect she gave to my invisible pulling away, the fact that she understood exactly what I was doing and chose not to make it harder. I told Jess everything the second week of December. All of it. The ER, the library, the coffee shop, the thing Clara had said about the bus stop, the way I'd felt, the folder, all of it. Jess was quiet for a moment when I finished. Okay, she said finally. That's it? I mean, Jess said. This is not news to me, Millie. I stared at her. What do you mean it's not news? She gave me the particular look she reserved for moments when she had clearly been waiting a long time to say something. I mean that you have always gotten very quiet around women you find interesting. And you have always had a reason why that didn't mean anything. And I have watched this happen since college, and I love you, and I was waiting for you to get there yourself. You could have said something, I said. Would that have helped? I thought about it. No, I admitted. She nodded. So here you are, she said. Now what? And that was the question, wasn't it? Now what? I thought about the folder. 11 years of a very neat, well-organized life. I thought about the person I'd made myself into. Practical, forward-moving, no loose ends. I thought about all the ways I'd been choosing the surface-level version of things, the version that fit the plan. The relationships that were fine but not full. The choices that made sense but didn't ache with rightness. The life that worked, in the way that things can work while still being slightly too small. And I thought about Clara. Not as a problem, not as a complication. Just Clara. Her hands around a mug. The sound of her voice reading aloud a sentence she liked. The way she remembered the thing I'd said in passing. The way she'd looked at me across that coffee shop table and said, I think you do. I had spent 11 years getting very good at not knowing things. I was so tired of it. I texted her on a Friday evening in December. Just, are you free Sunday? 3 minutes passed. Then, yes, just that. Yes. We met at the park near the library. Her suggestion, neutral ground, which told me she understood exactly what was happening. It was cold. The kind of Cincinnati December cold that has no interest in being reasonable about itself. We were both in coats and scarves, and walking along the path by the pond, and I was trying to figure out how to start. She let me struggle for exactly 100 yards before she said gently, You don't have to have a speech ready. I don't have a speech, I said. Good. I've never done this, I said. Not the whole thing, just that sentence, just that truth. She looked at me sideways. Done what? Said the thing, I said. The true thing, out loud. She didn't say anything. She kept walking. She was giving me the space to keep going. I recognized something in you, I said, that first day in the ER. And it scared me because I'd recognized it before, in high school. And I'd spent a very long time not knowing what to do with it, or pretending I didn't know. Which is, I stopped. Which is the same thing, I think. My breath made small clouds in the cold air. I've been very organized about my life, I said. I'm good at it. I know how to build things that make sense and hold together. And then you walk through that curtain and I looked at you and I thought, oh, there it is. The thing I organized around. She had stopped walking. I stopped too. She was looking at me in the gray December light, and her eyes were the darkest brown I had ever seen up close, and there was something in her face that was not just patience or warmth or the steadiness she wore like second skin. There was something older than that. Something that knew. I never stopped, she said. I blinked. What? Thinking about you, she said. I never stopped. After graduation, after college, after residency, after I moved back, I thought about that walk to the bus stop. Her voice was quiet, completely steady. I thought about the margins in your books. I thought about what you said that afternoon about Cincinnati smelling like rain. I carried all of it. For 11 years. A small pause. I wasn't sure what to do with it either. I stood there in the December cold and felt something I had no good word for. It wasn't relief yet. It was something just before relief. That moment when you realize the thing you've been carrying alone was never yours alone to carry. Clara, I said. Yeah, she said. I don't know how to do this, I said. I want to be honest about that. I stopped. Started again. I'm figuring out what I am, or what I've always been, and didn't let myself see. And I know that's not it's not the ideal. Millie, her voice cut through gently. I know. You know? I know you, she said. I've known something about you since we were 17. You don't have to have it all sorted out. You just have to be here. I looked at her in that light. The pond was flat and gray beside us. Someone's dog was chasing a leaf in the distance, delighted by its own existence. My scarf was slightly crooked, and I was cold, and I was more present, in that moment, than I had been in 11 years. I'm here, I said. She looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't look away. We walked for another hour. We talked about everything and nothing. A podcast she'd been listening to. A book I thought she'd like. The dog that was still chasing the leaf triumphantly now. We circled back to the beginning of things, carefully, without pressure. She told me about the years after graduation. I told her about mine. We found the places where our lives had run in parallel without our knowing, the ways we'd both built things that fit, but didn't quite fill the shape we were. At some point, our arms were close enough that the sleeves of our coats were touching. Neither of us moved away. At the end of the path, near the park gate, we stopped. She had to get back. I had things in the afternoon that suddenly felt very far away and much less important than they had that morning. I looked at her, and I thought about everything I had prepared myself to say and didn't say. The speeches I'd quietly written and discarded. The careful, measured versions of this moment I'd rehearsed. And then I let all of that go. I used to watch you in English class, I said. I thought you knew. I thought everyone could see. She shook her head slowly. I was too busy hoping you couldn't see me watching you. We stood there with that between us. With 11 years of that between us. I didn't have a word for what I felt. It wasn't a word kind of moment. It was the kind of moment that exists before words, in the place where you make a decision without announcing it, where the body knows something the brain is still catching up to. I stopped pretending I didn't know what this was. Not with a speech, not with a grand gesture. Just by standing there, in the December cold, and looking at her without the careful architecture of not knowing between us. Just by letting her see the thing I had been keeping in a folder for 11 years. The thing that wasn't just feeling, but recognition. The version of myself I'd been most afraid to introduce to the world. She saw it. I watched her see it. And she didn't look away either. Hi, she said, softly, like it was the first time. Hi, I said back. And for a second, just a second, her hand found mine, cold from the December air, and held it. One brief, certain, unhurried moment of contact. Then she smiled. The left side smile. The one with nothing performed in it at all. PT on Tuesday? She said. I laughed. I actually laughed. I'll let you know how the exercises are going. You'd better, she said. She walked toward her car. I stood at the gate a moment longer. The sky was that particular pale gray of late afternoon in winter, and my breath made small clouds, and my hand was still warm where hers had been. I was terrified. I was also, underneath the terrified, something I didn't have a word for either. Something that felt like the first full breath in a very long time. Something that had been waiting in a folder for 11 years, patient as a library book on reserve, waiting for someone to finally come and claim it. I claimed it. I walked home, 3 flights of stairs. Elevator works fine. I sat on my couch, and I did not stare at my phone. I just sat there, in the quiet of my apartment, and let myself exist inside the truth of what I felt, without immediately organizing it into something manageable. It wasn't manageable. It was enormous and inconvenient and completely certain. I was done pretending otherwise. I finally had what I'd spent 11 years carefully not wanting. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a plan. It was a hand in the cold, and a left side smile, and a girl who had kept my margins in her memory for years. It was me, finally. Whole. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't the grand gesture. Sometimes it's just standing in the December cold and letting someone see you, really see you, and not organizing your face into something easier to hold. If this story reached you in some way, type whole in the comments. So I know you made it all the way here with me. And if you want to keep going, keep feeling. Click the video coming up on your screen right now. A big hug, and until the next story.